Welcome to episode 318 of CppCast, the first podcast for C++ developers by C++ developers. I'm your host, Rob Irving, joined by my co-host, Jason Turner. Jason, how you doing today?
I'm all right, Rob. How you doing?
Doing good. I don't know about you, but I'm starting to get very excited for the movie Dune coming out in exactly 1 month from recording.
I actually did not know when it was coming out. I mean, I've seen the original movie like a half dozen times, and it's weird. And then I just read all 5 books in the original trilogy.
I'm a very slow reader, but I started reading it a year ago, and then when I heard the movie got delayed, I just put it down for months and months and months, and I finally started reading it again. I'm committed to finishing it before next month, but yeah, got some more reading to do.
I do find it slightly annoying that the way the title is stylized in the new movie cover, it looks like Dunk. It really looks like D-U-N-C. Yeah, but anyhow.
Yeah. Anything else you want to talk about before we get going?
Maybe, just a little plug for CppCon. If you're still trying to decide whether or not you're coming, it's in a month. Of course, we don't know what exactly the situation around the world is going to be. Sure. We do know that Europeans are not going to be able to come to America yet because the Biden administration just said the 1st of November is when they plan to open up European travel. So that's a week too late. But if you're still thinking about it, go ahead and make your decisions. Flying inside the U.S. seems to be pretty safe right now, and Colorado's in a pretty good state, besides being a pretty good state.
And if you did want to attend and you're outside of the US, you can definitely get those virtual tickets still, right?
Yeah, there's the virtual tickets. And also just want to, since I haven't mentioned what talk I am giving, it was officially accepted. I am supposed to be teaching a class, which is going to be one of, I think, only 2 classes that's still going to be on site because I live here. So if people want to come to my on-site class, I'm going to put on an on-site class. And that is practical performance practices. And it's kind of like my take on best practices, but how do you do that in the light of performance being a higher concern? And then the talk that I'm giving is your new mental model for ConstExpr. And I don't think I really intended this, but it's kind of like, if you were to argue that my Rich Code for Tiny Computers, CppCon, Commodore 64 talk was part 1, and ConstExpr All the Things with Ben Dean was part 2, this is part 3 of that very unintentional series of talks. But it directly ties into those other 2.
Very cool. Okay, well, at the top of every episode, I like to read a piece of feedback. We got a lot of great feedback from last week's episode with Bob Nystrom talking about Dart and his Crafting Interpreters book. This one is a tweet from Elliot, and he wrote, "The episode has it all. Thank you for the concise explanation of Dark. Well articulated and very accessible. Crafting Interpreters, paperback ordered." And Elliot did realize that he misspelled Dart as dark and said, "Pardon the typo, Dark will be the name of my experimental programming language." But Bob actually pointed out Dark is already a programming language.
Yeah, then we had a little side conversation on Twitter there about maybe it requires you to use their dark mode IDE.
Yeah, it's wild how many languages are out there.
Yeah, I know. I actually, at some point a few years ago, someone was made a comment on CoffeeScript or whatever. And I'm like, well, I've got ChaiScript. And they're like, oh, I knew that would come eventually. You copied so-and-so. I'm like, actually, ChaiScript is 3 years older than this other thing that you're referencing, whatever it was. I don't remember the exact conversation now. Right. But yeah, if you can name a word, there's probably a programming language for it.
Probably. Okay, we'd love to hear your thoughts about the show. You can always reach out to us on Facebook, Twitter, or email us at feedback@cppcast.com. And don't forget to leave us a review on iTunes or subscribe on YouTube. Joining us today is Amir Kirsh. Amir is a lecturer at the Academic College of Tel Aviv and dev advocate at Incredibuild. Amir is also one of the organizers of the CoreCpp conference and meeting group, and a member of the Israeli ISO C++ national body. And also,
hi, Rob. Hi, Jason.
How you doing?
Hey, Amir.
Also joining us is Avi Lachmish. Avi is an expert in web and networking technologies, operating systems, and software development methodologies. Avi has extensive experience in C++, object-oriented analysis, and design and distributed architecture. He's also a member of the Israeli ISO C++ national body, and Avi recently joined Incredibuild in his career path. Avi, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
So I'm curious, a question for both of you. How large is the Israeli national body at this point?
It's about, I think, between 5 to 10 people.
Okay.
Okay.
It's 5 to 10 people, I mean, in regular meetings, but I think that we have about 20 people registered to the group. So the group is getting people from Israel who do C++ and have the expertise to influence or to interact on that. And we have bi-weekly two meetings a month, reviewing papers, talking about papers from the mailing list.
Very cool.
One of those confusing English words there, bi-weekly or bi-monthly. Do you mean every other month or do you mean twice a month? It's like...
Yeah. This is why I interpreted what I mean.
And we've covered the founding of the Israeli national body, I think, on CppCast over the last couple of years or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember, like, how old is it now? It's relatively young, but seems to be moving along, right?
Yeah, I think it was founded a bit before the Prague meeting.
Right.
That sounds right.
Yeah. They announced us there. So.
And the Prague was the last
in-person meeting. Yeah.
The idea was
hopefully
somehow raised, I think, in the CoreCpp conference on 2019. I think Bryce pushed for you should have Israeli national body, and he did that quite well, probably. So in Levi and others took the glove, and here we are.
Michael Berry, Dan, a lot of people.
That sounds like something Bryce would do.
All right. Well, Amir and Avi, we got a couple news articles to discuss. Feel free to comment on any of these, and we'll start talking more about the recent Core C++ conference and some other stuff, okay?
Yeah.
All right. So this first one is a project on GitHub. This is called Idle, which is an asynchronous, hot reloadable, and highly reactive dynamic component framework similar to OSGI. And we've certainly talked about other ways of hot reloading code before. This one is a fairly new project, although it's based on OSGI, which I was not familiar with, but that seems to be a similar Java thing for being able to, modularly, componentize your code and be able to swap things in and out.
So much easier in Java with the JVM and introspection. You can just pull stuff out of there, but
seems like it's pretty powerful though. The author is, definitely saying it's not production ready yet, but he's encouraging everyone to try it out.
It looks fancy.
It does look very fancy.
I feel like we should find the author of this project and get them on the show.
That would probably be a good interview. Yeah. Did you two have a chance to look at this one?
Yeah, I've just looked at the examples and read a bit about it. It's cool the way that it defines its dependencies, so it could understand what it needs to make sure that is still up while using a certain service that is dependent on another service. Then he understands the environment that he runs in. Other than that, there is a note that's saying that this is not ready yet and you shouldn't use that in production. So I haven't had the chance yet, other than looking at the examples, doing with it anything else.
I guess to be fair, is any software ever really ready for production?
That's a good question.
Very true. Very true. Okay, next thing we have is the September mailing for ISO C++ papers. And obviously there's a lot going on here. And I kind of want to just throw it over to Amir and Avi on this one, because you're both members of the ISO committee. Anything we should be highlighting here? Yeah,
there are a few. One of them that beat me a bit, which is the lambda trailing return type. The idea is that the trailing return type doesn't take into consideration the capture. So it uses the identifier before it is using the capture. So there could be a mismatch between what's the body of the function understand about the identifier and the trailing return type, and then weird stuff can happen. You could, decide that you would like to return a double when it's actually returning an integer, and then strange thing might happen. You could do a meta template programming in the lambda itself, and then strange thing might happen. The best thing that can happen is that you won't be able to compile. The worst thing is that can happen that you might really compile and run, and the strange thing still can happen.
So currently, if I understand, on the trailing return type, you cannot reference the captures at all. And this change would let you say, oh, the trailing return type, decal type of, capture 1 plus capture 2 or whatever.
Okay. Yeah, the idea is that when you are capturing by value, then weird things might happen because the default of lambda is const, and therefore the values, when they are used, they should be considered as const.
Okay.
And therefore, weird things might happen as well, other than just understanding a different deducing type.
Okay.
From the type itself.
So
it's really an interesting. Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, sorry, Avi. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I think that this paper is related in the subject to the abbreviated lambda effort that is being pushed. And in a way, C++ needs or would benefit from abbreviated lambda, but of course, only if it works as expected. So, the return value that you would get would be the same that you actually expect. So I'm not sure that this touches the same issue, but I think the whole discussion around lambda today is related to the question of abbreviated lambda.
Okay. I haven't looked at that. I know that we got in C++23 more cases where you can leave off the parens for lambda, but I didn't know if the even more abbreviated lambda proposal had actually been progressing. I have not followed that.
So there was a proposal for allowing to omit the return keyword.
Oh,
so you
right.
Just arrow the return value by equal, greater, which would be an arrow to the return value, but there are some issues with that. It's quite a long time out there, the idea of abbreviated lambda, and there are some issues. So I'm not sure that it would go to 23.
I use a lot of lambdas. I'd like to see that. I actually saw a comment from someone on Twitter, and I don't know their full argument, but they said that too much damage has been already done by the overuse of lambdas. And I'm like, you know what? I'll just go ahead and take credit for that because I published like 35 videos on lambdas. So
everybody is trying now to inherit lambdas.
It's a thing to do.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm going to go ahead and give just a quick little teaser and say, in the talk that I was talking about at the top of the show that I'm going to be giving at CppCon, I show a use case for lambdas that I have never seen anyone else use before. So I'm guessing I'm not the first person to have done this, but it might be something novel and new and interesting to you. So just should watch that talk when it comes out. Anyhow.
I'm also going to be at the CppCon giving a talk on C++ complexities.
Okay.
So I think that this relates very well to C++ complexities in a way. And of course, there is always the question of, do we use the proper tools, or do we in some way abuse the tools? So this is a discussion. We will not open it here, but C++ complexities is always something that C++ programmers like to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, we're kind of bad in the C++ world of liking the creative solution, which is not necessarily the best solution.
Or the simplest one.
Or the simplest one, yeah.
Yeah. We talked about the mailing list, and there is also their deducing this. And deducing this is a very important paper, I think. I talked about that in one of the Core C++ meetup meetings that we have. So I'm happy to see that it is progressing. I hope to see it because I think eventually it will reduce the amount of boilerplate code, and this is a very nice proposal.
So we'll probably see that one in C++ 23, do you think?
It seems quite mature and people like it. So
Right.
I don't see much, opposition for that. So I do think that it would come in.
Cool. I know also Ben Dean is going to be giving a talk on deducing this at CppCon. He's one of the authors on that paper.
Another interesting thing that was in the previous mailing list, I see it on the July mailing list, is a paper from our Israeli National Body attendee, a member, Yechezkel Bernat. And in fact, he says that the main person on the proposal on the paper is his son, 16 years old, who actually found the issue with counted iterator. So P2406 is talking about a counted iterator, which has some issues when you use ranges. A very nice paper that shows the issues and proposes some solutions. So there are several nice things here. First, it comes from the Israeli National Body member, and with his son, 16 years old. I think this is what we want to bring to C++. And it touches an actual issue that should be treated.
I wonder if that's the youngest paper author that there's been for an ISO paper.
Maybe you can bring him to next episode.
Wait, I had no idea that counted iterator had been merged into C++ 20. Now I'm like, wait, what? All right, I'm sorry. I'm going to have to look into that some more.
It is being used when you want to get the top X results from a view. So you filter something and then you want to get X results from a view. And then down beneath, it is using a counted iterator. And counted iterator has a behavior that the spec itself is very strict about the definition of its behavior. And the definition, in a way, creates some strange behavior when you try to filter something and top the 10 first results. And even if you have the 10 first results at the end, it will still go for the 11 one, just to see that it doesn't have anything more. And then you might get into an infinite loop, even though you already got what you wanted. And this is what the paper presents.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Definitely have to look at that some more.
Yeah, so this was P2406.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, I'll have to put a link to that one in the show notes. Okay, and then the last article we have today is it's actually like a table on algorithm intuition, chart on algorithm intuition, and we certainly talked about this concept before with Connor and Kate Gregory, and this is based on their talks where they talk about algorithm intuition, and the author of this chart basically tried to summarize and categorize all the algorithms so that they can be, I guess, a little bit easier to learn so that you could start having your own algorithm intuition when looking at your C++ code.
And just read over this and be like, wait, I've never heard of that algorithm before.
So many.
Yeah, it's confusing.
Yeah, but I mean, handy. Like, I've seen a lot of arguments lately about how special the design of the STL is compared to other libraries and other languages, that we've got this compile time, type safe collection of algorithms that we can apply to all of our containers. And so it's probably it's an important part of the language to be familiar with for sure. And I think largely overlooked by the average C++ programmer.
Yeah, nevertheless, there are a lot of other libraries that gives fights to the STL while using different kind of containers like Upsil, like Boost, that gives a better implementation sometimes for string or other containers that might be interesting.
On that note, and if you don't mind, just real quick, flipping back to the last news thing, there was a C++ 23 proposal to add another a replace data function to standard string.
Yeah.
And that one, the committee body votes were strongly in favor of it, which really surprised me because so many people already think that string is just way overdone, that it already has way too many methods already.
Yeah, resize and override.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah. I think I understood the issue. I don't remember it right now. But the idea is that the main idea is that I think that when you are resizing the buffer, you are writing a default value and then you are copying the data that you would like to copy. So you need to use the append method, and then you have to remember that you still have space. So each time you are appending something, you need to check it. The append function itself is using if every time you're appending a new stuff to it, and that will do that in one operation. It will also create the space and copy the data. That's the main idea.
Right. Okay. Well, Amir, when we last had you on the show a couple months ago, we definitely talked about the Core C++ conference a bit, and now the conference has been held. And let's maybe start off with talking about that and how the conference was. How was it having an in-person conference? It's kind of been a long time since any of us have seen those.
Yeah. So we as organizers were a bit stressed. I would say till the moment that we start the event. But it was a great success. People were very excited getting into a physical environment, seeing each other. And they did come. We had to close the registration because we wanted to have a limited amount of people in the rooms. So we had some over registrations that we had to close, and people ask if you can just give them a spare ticket. That's nice to hear that, to have overbooking. And we, COVID-wise, we had antigen fast checks for everybody on the first day. Yeah. Okay. And I think that C++ programmers do believe in vaccinations. So it goes together. If you believe in C++, in a way, you believe in vaccinations. I think 100% were vaccinated, and those that were not, they had to come with their own check, with their own test results, and then we had also the tests in the conference, and of course masks when you are in the room. And it went fine. People got to being used to wear masks. Right. We are back to normal in a way, and I do believe CppCon is going to be the same success.
Yeah, and that's an interesting note for those who, I don't think we've mentioned this, you are actually required to be vaccinated or have some other medical documentation for CppCon. So when you go to register for the conference, you have to submit a copy of your vaccination certificate, whatever that looks like.
Oh, okay.
Anyhow.
And we also had Bjarne. Although he wouldn't be able to come physically, he did a talk, a virtual talk, an online talk, which was great also. Avi, did you? I felt like he's in the room. Avi.
Yeah, me as well. The only thing I was missing is, him signing me on some book.
We are mostly, we appreciate very much Bjarne giving his time, and it is always a pleasure hearing him talking about C++ and seeing how smart the ideas that were, to begin with, and things that he saw. And you go back to videos of Bjarne from the 90s, and you see that he's speaking about the same things But the change is that it is now in the language. So
Right.
Crazy.
it's so nice to see that his thoughts are coming into the language, periodically or gradually, and that's fascinating. That's really cool.
There is a talk that he did, I think, in 1994 about concepts. Go and listen and see how much similar concepts are today.
Right.
That's crazy.
What was that he said is the last thing left? Oh, operator dot. He said operator dot was the last thing left that he wants. I mean, he said that in the past, and it doesn't look like we'll ever get it.
Yeah, I think that he mentioned that also in his lecture in CoreCpp. Yeah.
Okay.
But I do agree that it seems that this one is off the table. Even though you can do very smart things with operator dot. Yeah. But it seems that it goes to other directions.
Do you want to talk about some of the other topics Bjarne went into during his keynote?
One of the good things of having Bjarne with us is having people from the audience asking questions, and the questions were very good on the progress of the language, on comparing it to other languages like Rust and D. So Bjarne said that he played with Rust a bit, and he prefers C++. Naturally. So I would say the same. But I do think that Rust is a very interesting language. I think it is. It has something with that, and people who go to Rust, which are not C++ lovers, people do like it. I see people that go to Rust and say, yeah, it's a nice language. On the other end, most people that come from C++ in a way say that, well, it's too complicated and it's not actually solving the actual problems. I think it goes back to Fred Brooks of essence and accident. So it might maybe try to deal with the accident, but the essence is there, and the essence is programming is a difficult thing, and there isn't any silver bullet, and Rust is not a silver bullet yet. In order to write probably a linked list in Rust, you have to go to unsafe, because you have a double linked list or right. Something is there not owned, and people coming from Rust would say, yeah, but then this would be in the library, and you as a programmer are in the safe mode. But eventually there is a learning curve, and I would see it as C++ is going as you get the liberty, and you have to write efficient code and safe code. On the other end, Rust is going with the compiler or static analyzer would protect you, but in a way will also narrow your options. And then if you want to do something which you cannot, and maybe you need it for optimization, then you have to go to unsafe. So in a way, these are two opposite ways ways of doing eventually the same thing.
Yeah, and I've heard anecdotes from people doing code reviews in the Rust world where they'll go in to look at someone's code, and the new Rust programmer will basically like, well, I couldn't figure out that borrow checker thing, so I just put everything in unsafe. Which, I mean, completely, like, clearly that's like number one best practice. Don't do this in Rust, right? But right. It's the kind of thing that, people do in any programming language if they're given that escape hatch.
Yeah, I have a short blog on Rust versus C++, so maybe I will put it in the chat.
Okay,
sure.
We can
share that in the show notes.
Yeah.
Well, let's start talking a little bit more about some of the other conference talks. Avi, you gave one on writing a cache-friendly C++ hash. Is that right?
Yeah, I did. So generally, if I need to conclude the 1 hour talk in one sentence, you should always use vector. It's usually the best case. But the main idea is that no matter what type of program you are writing in, At the end, the hardware is the one that runs it, and the hardware is running with cache, and cache is working in a certain way. Then that it has to have cache locality and cache temporary. That those are characteristics that affects the data itself, and it should affect the way that we are programming our critical path. By that I mean we should think about our cache line, what it holds, and we should really try to use our cache line to the best. I mean, if we decided to load something into the cache line, we should use it. We should use all the cache line if we can. So we should lay out our memory. We should think about the layout of our memory in the cache in order to write a good cache-friendly software. That's in a nutshell.
Which relates to data-oriented versus object-oriented.
Yeah, in a bit. The idea is that array of struct and struct of array, you're handling the data in a struct that is keeping all the types the same, so the alignment is good. You're using only the data that needs to be used. So if you have, let's say, a shape, rectangle, and the circle, and you want to calculate their size, and some of them are visible and some of them are not visible, then today, if I'm using an object-oriented programming, I would create a shape, which is an abstract class, and then I will inherit it to create a circle and a rectangle, and I will have a Boolean saying if it's visible or not visible, and think about the cache line in that manner. First, when you're drawing, you're running with a for, which has an if it's visible or not visible each and every time. Mm-hmm. Then you're calling a virtual function, which is also a pointer. Then you're chasing stuff in memory. That means that it doesn't sit near your cache. And you're using visible in the worst manner. Think about it. You're loading stuff into cache when all you need to know is if it's visible or not visible. You're loading all the cache line itself, to create the object. Okay, so that's and more than that, a Boolean is a 1-bit value. Think about how much space do you consume on the cache itself. Think about the cache sizes; they are very small. Okay, and the cache line itself is very small. So you need to be very careful if you're on a hot path. If you're not on a hot path, that's not that bad. But if you're on a hot path, then you should think about it.
All right. So do you actually then recommend having, like Amir mentioned, like data-oriented design kind of thing, like a completely separate data structure that is, or array that is just the visibility of the objects or something like that?
It depends. As I said at the beginning, I find data-oriented design weird. I was burned to build stuff in object-oriented design. That's the way I think. Okay, like I'm thinking in C++. That's the way I think. Using data-oriented design really took me to a place where I really needed it. And if I really needed it, then even assembly is stuff that I've done in order to be fast.
Right.
And then you still can hide the data-oriented design with proper classes. So you may approach a class which is circle, maybe with static functions. But eventually you can hide the data-oriented way of building things when you need it. I mean, don't go there when, this is not your bottleneck.
Yeah, right. And one more thing maybe, think about your code. Your code is also something that comes into your caches. So think about inline. Inline is great. It's replacing stuff when it happens, it replaces stuff in your code by using the data of the code itself, right? So it doesn't jump to a function to understand what it needs to do. So it's something good from the cache perspective. But from the other hand, it really blows the instruction set, which means it might happen where something needs to occur and another instruction is blown out of cache because that there was an inline. Inline might affect the cache size itself as well if you have a lot of inlines.
Right.
It was a very good talk, by the way. I liked it very much. If you go to listen for it, it's on YouTube, but I would say beforehand, it's in Hebrew.
Yeah.
Some of the lectures in CoreCpp were given in Hebrew because it was a local conference this year,
right.
Because of COVID. We hope very much that next year we will be back to English, to international conference. But this one was with local attendees, so some of the talks were in Hebrew, some in English.
Yeah, I was going to ask, so then some people chose to speak in English then, it sounds like, to present in English, I mean.
Yeah. It was open for the presenter to choose.
Okay. I'm trying to remember if there was, I know there had, the first year of Core C++, when I was there was a planned Hebrew track, but then if I recall, the plan for Hebrew track then was abandoned when they got more international attendees.
It was all English.
Okay.
Yeah. I went to your workshop.
Oh.
I'm saying that we do hope that next year will be back to English and international audience.
Yeah, we all hope that it'll be back to international audience next year.
Yeah, definitely.
Any other highlights from the conference that you want to cover before we?
I can talk a bit about my talk on C++ complexities,
Sure.
which I'm giving a very similar talk. Usually, there are some nuances. After you give some talk, then you amend things. But we discussed the complexities, and I asked the audience, what is complex for you in C++? And there was a questionnaire. And it is interesting to look at the answers. And in the same questionnaire, I asked about how many years are you in C++? So we can see the difference between veterans and newcomers. So newcomers point at R value and move semantics. Veterans don't see that as an issue. They just got into it. Both veterans and newcomers agree that dealing with memory issues, I mean, when you have memory smears or leaks, this is the top complexity for many, which I think rusters would just jump and say, okay, here we are, come to Rust. And I would say that, it's not that there is a silver bullet. And the other interesting items, well, one of the top items is handling long builds, which is, a good answer coming from Incredibuild.
Right.
We have a solution for that, happily. And we didn't push this answer. It was there with many other possibilities, and it seems that long builds is still a problem in the C++ arena, but there are solutions for that. So if you want to check Incredibuild, you're invited.
So on that topic, since it was a small local conference, did you still have the vendor tables and all those things at the?
Yes, we had.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, we had.
We had, and with local companies, I'm trying to recall whether the companies presented. Yeah, we had also international companies, like, for example, GM.
Oh.
GM has a lot of C++, and GM was there.
Hiring, I assume?
Hiring mostly, but also presenting. People like to present what they do.
Right.
I would call it soft hiring. Don't come to us today, you are elsewhere, but maybe in 2 years, in 3 years, you have to know that we are doing interesting stuff.
Right.
On that topic of Incredibuild, Amir, we talked about you joining the company last time we had you on, but Avi, you also joined recently as well?
Yeah, I'm here like 4 months, and I'm it's been a journey for me to look for my right job. I'm very passionate to C++ and what I'm doing. And I was looking for something that combined my passion and my thoughts about C++. And Incredibuild is very invested in C++. It it really, I think you heard about the product, but nevertheless, it really handles greatly in distributing microservices or microprocessors out of build, but not only out of build. It takes the whole ecosystem into account, like testing, like static analysis tool, and other stuff, so that people, programmers would consider doing all that and in a short while. The main idea, if I'm thinking Incredibuild, is exists like 20 years. And I look for the history of Incredibuild, and the owners really thought that they could distribute stuff while one core exists, because build took an hour, and they thought when there would be 4 cores, they will be out of business. But guess what? When there were 4 cores, it would take an hour, and so, because of code bloating, because of other things that we are doing on the software itself. So it's combined my passion and I'm happy to be here. That's and they're using very cool stuff to do that. Very intelligent caching mechanism, things in the cloud, out of the cloud. Very interesting stuff happening here.
What is your actual role? I don't think we've mentioned that yet.
I didn't. It's weird a bit. I'm a group manager of many groups.
Oh, no, not a manager.
Yeah.
I think this is why he didn't want to mention that.
Yeah,
he wants to be a C++ programmer, developer, but he's a manager.
Maybe that's the case. It's not official. I came here to build the next generation of Incredibuild. Mm-hmm. That's the reason I joined them. But dreams alone and reality alone, and I came in and I've added a few groups, and there are difficult tasks and really interesting stuff that we are doing here.
Very cool.
So what are the, if you came in thinking I'm going to help build the next generation of Incredibuild, what does that look like? What is the vision for Incredibuild right now?
So the general vision is to do what they're doing, but, taking into consideration things like other system other than builds, that's not that easy as it sounds. You need to understand stuff like dependencies and other stuff. To be able to do that. I think the thing I love most about Incredibuild is that it is transparent to the programmer. It doesn't need to do anything into his tools, nothing other than installing a small agent, and all the magic occurs without him doing anything. He's using CMake, Make, whatever toolchain he has, it should work. And doing that for other things is a difficult task if you want to achieve that in that transparent. So think about dealing with cache. Dealing with cache for building would mean, saving the obj file, understanding its dependencies, signed it in some way, and so and so. But doing that for testing is a different task, right?
So you actually then with Incredibuild do you currently support distributed execution of the test environment, or is that one of these future goals?
It really depends how you write your tests. If you're writing them in the correct manner, then yes. But if you don't...
So the answer is that we actually have customers that use Incredibuild to accelerate testing.
Intel does, and other big companies do.
Okay.
But in order to make it more transparent, there is still some work to be done. Nevertheless, it is working with test. So there are customers using acceleration for testing to the cloud or on-prem using Incredibuild.
I was just looking at someone else's test who you had to execute the test from a particular hard-coded known directory because it didn't take into account where you may have chosen to put the build directory for example, which CMake and CTest you can do, but it's easy to do that kind of hard-coded thing, which I can imagine would then get in the way of trying to distribute the execution of your test.
So the general idea is that we are virtualizing the process itself. We are not doing that on the same machine, right? We are taking that process and creating that on another agent, and that agent is talking to the initiator in order to understand its dependencies so that it could load from there what it needs, if it's a file, if it's an environment variable, and so. Okay.
So for example, I think if I can take it to build, if you go to a machine which has an agent but doesn't have the proper version of the compiler, you would get it transparently with Incredibuild. So it really just, like click a button to build, and for the build process, this is something that is being very transparent. For other things, can be done, being done, but there is still work to make it transparent as the build process for C++.
Other things, COVID-19 pushed us to work on low bandwidth networks and stuff like that we hadn't had the chance yet. And there are other big tasks that need to be achieved in order for that to be really transparent for what we want to call the next generation.
Okay.
And there is always the challenge of supporting all different environments, because customers come with different compilers, different operating systems, environments, etc., and eventually they want the thing just to work. And this is one of the challenges.
I wonder if we could maybe go back to C++ committee work for a moment. Avi, how long have you been with the committee?
I'm there a bit before Prague.
Okay.
Avi went to Prague. I think that Avi, you can share the experience of being when C++ 20 was signed and released.
I was so afraid to talk there. I can't tell you guys because everyone I knew were in the room. The feeling is great. I think that the committee is doing a great job. I think that we could see that in C++. If you take like a decade ago, everybody would say that C++ was at least a bit declining, and maybe we should use C# or Java or other languages at the time.
Or C++.NET maybe.
Managed C++, and other languages at that time. And I think that today we could see that there are many features, a lot of stuff. I'm doing that like for 25 years now, and I'm loving C++. I don't know, I'm that geek. I've been to the first CPP conf ever with Bjarne and Herb Sutter. There were like, I think 200 people there. How many are going to be in Colorado now?
Wow. And 2021, we don't know, but if it had stayed on track, then it would sort of been something like 1,300.
Yeah. So think about that. Herb Sutter stood on a stage with Bjarne with a piano and sang us a song. We are the champion or something like that. We will still build. Look it up.
That's interesting because I don't know the last time I saw Herb play the piano. He would do that regularly at CppCon in Seattle. Would just randomly use one of the pianos.
Think about taking 3,000 people or 30,000 people and put them with a piano, and Herb Sutter will sing a song.
We have to ask him for that. The first CppCon was in New York. It was in Seattle, right?
No, it wasn't in Seattle. I don't remember the place it was. I think maybe Washington, maybe New York. I don't
East
remember.
Coast.
Yeah.
I'm not sure about that. I thought CppCon was always in
on the West Coast,
Bellevue before it went to Colorado.
Okay. It started from the Going Native conference.
Right.
It came out of that, but I wasn't there the first year or two. I was 2000. 2015 was my first year. I missed the first 1 or 2 years.
Sorry.
That's
Sorry.
fine.
Talking a bit about the ISO, so there is when you want to release a new paper, then you should submit that to the committee, and the committee is dealing with that. So I wanted to tell you a bit about how that's done.
Sure.
Okay, so there is a group called the WG21. That's a technical name for the committee itself. The committee converges 3 times a year for a week. Each time, the most important day is Saturday. That's the day that everybody votes for what's going in and what's not going in. Each time there is a new draft. It depends if it's a draft for ATS or international standard. And then it goes to the further committee so that it could be released as an international standard. Okay, that's the general idea. And beneath it, there are 2 main groups. There is the core group that deals with everything that is in the language, and there is the library group that deals with everything that is in the library. And beneath it, there are special groups that are dealing with special things like ranges, and there are many groups now. So you could go and look for them. So, and today, since there are many papers, the groups that starts with the papers are called incubators. So we have 2 incubators, one that are for the language and the other one is for the library. And my impression from being in the room with all those guys were amazing. I think this is the way that you could influence really about the language. Really write a paper. Don't just talk about it. Even though I'm only talking about it. But I'm really trying to influence. I have many friends that are writing papers. I'm trying to review them, trying to give them some country. And it's a really interesting process. And I think this is the reason that this language, it's like, how long does this language exist? More than 20 years, right? Do you know anything in technology that exists for more than 20 years?
35, 36.
Yeah. So I think it's amazing.
It relates to something that Bjarne raised in his talk in CoreCpp, that a change has to be made slowly and carefully. And I think the committee is smart enough to review anything with great care, to understand what is the purpose, how to go there, or maybe there are other means to achieve the same goal. So it's not that there is a good idea, let's rush for it, let's push it into the language, let's see what we want to achieve, any other, maybe simpler ideas to achieve the same, and what it might break, which is always a very important question.
Definitely. We haven't asked this in a while, but what are your thoughts on how the committee work has been going over the past 1.5 years plus now since Prague with the virtual meetings?
It's much more complex, and it's not me saying, it's the committee saying that. Bjarne says there was a question after Bjarne talk in CoreCpp about how do he sees C++23 and would it be affected by COVID because there aren't any face-to-face meetings for the ISO committee. And Bjarne said that, he thinks that it would slow down a bit C++23, so less things would go in. He would like to see more things, but this is how it goes right now. And I think the reason is quite clear. It's much harder to push things when you have to, in a 20 people meeting in a Zoom, it's not the same as 20 people in the same room.
Right. Are there any tentative plans yet for an in-person meeting, or is it still just
October was just
TBD?
canceled, right?
Okay. Okay. Well, Amir and Avi, it was great having you on the show today. Are there any plans for CoreCpp 2022 yet?
We start talking about that right at the moment that we close 2021. We want to see how COVID goes on because, again, the plans are to have an international conference like we had in 2019. So we have to wait a bit and see how it goes. But I think that with the success of the local conference and the real demand for it, people like it, people want to join. So we would probably either have a local conference if we still have difficulties with an international one. But I do hope things should, at some end have everybody vaccinated and going back to normal. So I hope that we would have an international one.
Here's hoping.
Yeah, here's hoping. All right. Well, thank you both for coming on the show today.
Thank you for having us. Thank you.
Thank you.